This is Perspectivas Latinas, a community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernandez. In 1972, the National Latino Education Institute decided to challenge businesses in Chicago to hire more Latinos, but also to prepare Latinos for the workforce. Today, they provide employment training and job placement, as well as classes for adults. Here to talk about their work, we have Elba Aranda, the Executive Director. Welcome.
Thank you. Delighted to be here today.
Thanks. Well, let's start off by talking about you and how you became part of this nonprofit world and how that led you to become the Executive Director of this organization.
Wow, the $1,000,000 question. Since a very young person growing up in a little village, I'm a product of La Villita. I was always taught the importance of education and its impact on our economic stability and our economic future. A lot of that came from my home, and a big influence by my parents, who are Mexican immigrants. And so
what would they say? You need to go to school, you need to go to school?
They actually really understood, everybody knows you got to go to school, right? And
well,
so
not everybody.
Well, yes, but I mean the campaign that we all try as a community, as a collective community, is make sure our kids stay in school, make sure that our kids continue going to school, and we always kind of drill the importance of school. I think what happened at a young age, again, with my parents is, okay, well, because I always ask why. Well, why? So why? So, and they definitely came out, hitting a home run in terms of, they said, we're going to teach you why. We're going to show you what happens in various communities, not just here, but also, for example, in their home, country, Mexico, of what happens without, education. That was very powerful for me.
What did they show you specifically? They took you.
I was able to be exposed to extreme poverty, and then also see affluence as well. But not just that, but the not affluence in terms of just monetary affluence, but in terms of political power, and the impact that it can have on society as a good. In terms of, if you're able to be in decision-making roles, then you can actually do good for society. And so that had a big impact on me very early in my life. And then during college and all of those years, it was always important for me to get involved in any types of activities that involve economic development or economic progress, and there was always a very consistent theme there, and that was education, training, skills, being on top of the latest, trends in terms of, jobs, etc. So that started very early in my development. And so I have been in the, I would say, job training, economic empowerment, education to careers kind of world for over 15 years. Wow. And so I have definitely dedicated the vast majority of my career to economic empowerment, specifically for the Latino community, because I see our community who has, as you know, richness in our skills, in our assets, in our values, in everything that we have to give as a important fabric of this society, of our American society. And so whatever we can do to open doors, by way of the organization when I work for, we try to do that. But on a personal level, I'm constantly, looking at opportunities, to be able to open paths for economic progress.
Surprisingly, you didn't become a teacher, or have you been a teacher before?
I think somewhere early in the career, I taught a couple of classes, but again, it was under job training. So it was always teaching adults and teaching English, teaching literacy. I taught typing. I taught typing skills, things like that. So yes, I've been in the classroom. But again, the one thing that, and I enjoy kids, I enjoy, teaching kids and teaching teenagers, but what I really enjoyed early on was working with the heads of household, because they are the ones that have the most direct, immediate impact on their family in terms of ensuring that they're going to have that better job to provide for their kids, that they're going to learn the importance of literacy, the importance of education towards a better future. And so by building the capacity and the skills and the education and the vision, of those that run the household, and that could be an 18-year-old, a 35-year-old, a 50-year-old, it could be a man or a woman, or it could be together. But by building, those that are responsible, for their families in terms of the income and everything else that comes in, it's like that's kind of where you begin to then impact, the rest of the family unit. And so I thoroughly enjoyed working with parents and adults, and then seeing them, flourish, and then seeing now their kids, just really do phenomenal things in our community.
So that you're saying that the impact you're having on these heads of household has an impact, I guess, on the next generation.
Yes.
And therefore generations after that.
Yes.
And how did you become part of the National Latino Education Institute?
Well, I used to work for another Latino nonprofit, and I worked extremely closely with the founder of the Spanish Coalition for Jobs. And actually, I met her even before I worked for the other organization, and she became my mentor, and my mentor and my funder at the same time. So even when I was at the other organization, she headed at the time, the Mayor's Office of Employment and Training in Chicago, and Mayor Gonzalez Koenig is the founder of Spanish Coalition for Jobs. And we did a lot of great things together, even when I wasn't, with the organization that she founded. And so when she decided to come back to the organization, she asked me to come with her, and the rest is history.
Now, you mentioned the other name. That was the first name of NLEI, right? Spanish Coalition for Jobs.
NLEI is originally the Spanish Coalition for Jobs. So National Latino Education Institute is the new name as of 2008. So it's a relatively new name, but not a new organization. As you mentioned earlier, the organization has been in existence since 1972. It was incorporated in 1972, but in the mid-60s is actually when the Spanish Coalition for Jobs was formed, as in terms of a true grassroots organizing entity. And that's where the name came from, because they were a true coalition fighting for jobs for the Spanish-speaking people.
Right.
So
tell me about the, I don't know how much you know about that, but what environment gave birth to this coalition of people fighting for jobs? Was there a lot of, I mentioned there was discrimination, but how severe was it, and what led to this response through organization?
In the mid-60s, as you know, there was several movements, especially here in Chicago. The African American community was beginning to mobilize, and they had, a lot of work that they accomplished in the area of jobs, in the area, in so many different, social areas. But we found that, the coalition at the time was finding that there were limited jobs that our community was having access to. And then they also found that in sharing and comparing stories, that there were certain places or certain situations where screamed, discrimination or unfair treatment. Right. And so you had various different people from the community. The founder actually at the time was a mom in Pilsen. Later, she started working for another nonprofit, and you had other, organizers and other folks who then went on eventually to kind of start their own nonprofits as well. But it all started as, what's going on here? Let's take a look at the job situation, because again, without a good job, how can we take care of our families? So it starts there. And so the War on Poverty program was
from President Johnson,
right? I believe it was Nixon.
Okay, mid-60s, late 60s?
Yeah, late 60s, yes. So when the War on Poverty programs came out, that was an initiative that actually provided some opportunity to be able to kind of really look at what were the root causes of some of the poverty issues that we had. And so again, not being able to have a job came up, and so they said, well, let's really take a look at that. And so what they found is we need to be a little bit more aggressive here and see what we can do in various areas. So they did all kinds of things. They boycotted certain grocery stores in the neighborhood. They I have the stories of them standing in front of buses in order for them to hear them in terms of what they were there for, because they were being brushed off, and so they really needed to use some tactics. And I've had the pleasure of having to hear not only from the founder of Spanish Coalition for Jobs in terms of Incorporated, but so many different members of that coalition, some who are with us today, some who are not with us anymore. Right. And I am very fortunate that I've had time with them, and they've shared their direct stories, and I always remember that I stand on someone else's shoulders, and it is because of them that there are the opportunities that we even have today, and sometimes we forget that in terms of I think my generation and the generation after, and I'm starting to see that a little bit. So we really can't forget. We can't forget about those years where there were people who had nothing else to gain but to get the right thing for the community, and they did all kinds of harsh tactics that they needed to do.
So you're saying there's a generational difference of what do you see in your generation and the one after, is a sense of entitlement or something like that, or a sense of?
No, I think. I guess
we're going off the conversation.
Yeah, we are.
But we'll come back to it.
Yeah,
I'm just
sure.
Curious about that.
Yeah, no, not in terms of entitlement. Just when you haven't really kind of really heard the, I guess, the behind the scenes stories of so much that happened and so much sacrifice that happened for. We hear a lot of things on the national level, with our community. And so sometimes we don't really know about the background here in Chicago for the reasons why there are certain initiatives, for example, here locally. And so I've been, talking to the founder, for example. We got to get these stories. We got to, publish them, and people need to know. And again, we're blessed that the founders and the leadership that made jobs available, to Latino community and organizations like NLEI and other organizations that are in existence today. That's not, why they did it. This is, doors are open. It is now your responsibility to make sure you do everything that you can with that door that we had to bust open for you. So that's what I mean. I don't mean that it's an entitlement, but we might not really know the sweat and the tears and the sacrifices and sacrifices they even made with their own families to make sure that they busted those doors open. And now it's our responsibility to be able to maximize, those open doors. And we have a lot of work, a lot of work still to do. Right. But someone did have to bust it.
It's, I guess what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's not having a full understanding of the history, right? Sometimes it just gets lost in this constant motion of just daily life. That's one of the reasons why I do ask about your experience and how you came to this organization, because I think a lot of times we have the image that people just get plopped into a position without fully knowing what leads people there. Now you've been at NLEI how long?
It's going to be 15 years. 15
years. In your experience there, how has the organization grown and changed? And tell me about that, and then we'll talk specifically about the programs for the community.
Sure. Well, as you know, Spanish Coalition for Jobs, you know, the initial service was, you know, job service, but then very early on, the immediate direction was in training, skills training, almost immediately after the incorporation, because, you know, the founders saw the importance of, you know, skills training and competitiveness. So out of a funeral home on 18th Street, we were offering accounting, we were doing Wang training, we were doing English, we were doing math, we were really focusing. Right.
Former funeral home?
It's a former funeral home. Former funeral home. Okay. And we have graduates today that are from those classes, and they remember, you know, having to build their desks. You know, they remember so many, you know, a humble beginning and having these classrooms. But, you know, it didn't take much. It didn't take a lot of fancy stuff to get, you know, the quality skills training that they received, you know, yes, out of that building. Many of them are doing extremely well today, and I again have that, you know, fortunate experience to be able to be in touch with them and hear about how the organization impacted their lives and has impacted their kids' lives. And now they're impacting their kids' lives. Right. So it's you know, it's pretty amazing. So the quality of services and the focus on skills and education has been there from the very beginning of the organization. The name never changed because it went back. It really was the Spanish Coalition for Jobs. It was how it was created. It was the whole reason that, you know, it existed. It was a true coalition fighting for jobs. Flash forward a couple decades. Today we are a nationally accredited educational institute that is also a social services nonprofit. So it's a very unique type of organization. I was just, last week I just received notification that we are receiving an award for outstanding, you know, educational, educational outcomes and criteria. This is up against national business schools and trade schools and community colleges and things of that nature. So us little guys over here, you know, we try really hard to provide our focus on the quality of education and the quality of support that the students receive. And so that is, I think that is something that is very different. You know, it's just not coming into, jobs is still the outcome of everything that we do, or more like a career is the outcome of everything we do. But education is the path to every initiative that leads to a career from all of our services that we do. So that has not changed. We deliberately wanted education to be part of the name. You know, we are known as a jobs organization for so many years. It was kind of like purpose. You know, there was a purpose in terms of, you know,
that yes, one specific purpose.
Yes,
right?
Yes, we're the jobs place, but it's education. You know, we wanted to think education is really the means to, you know, the better jobs for here in the future. So as a nationally accredited educational institute, in our training programs, you know, they are able to transfer, you know, these types of studies over to higher education. So it's not just students don't just come in for loose, classroom activity. I mean, it's a true curriculum that is not only approved and regulated and monitored and evaluated by educational regulatory bodies, or that those types of that type of industry, or the education industry, the academic industry, but also we are evaluated, monitored, and looked at by the training and jobs industry and trades industry and labor industry. So we've just purposely really said, you know what, we're gonna hit it. We're gonna hit all the different areas that we need to ensure that the students graduate with the best possible, education that we, as a community organization, can offer them. So it's by design. It's a lot of work.
Right.
It's expensive, but in the end, the outcome is pretty impactful.
You mentioned a word earlier, quality. How is it that you, as an organization, ensure that quality is always in mind when you're carrying out your programs?
I think we evaluate ourselves. We're evaluated by all these different industries, and we evaluate ourselves. I mean, you have to always. No one's perfect,
right? And
you have to constantly be open and receptive, to ensuring that there's always a better way. Technology and the rapid global workplace is so fast and changes,
a lot
constantly.
Of automation and everything.
Yes, and so it's like, are we optimizing, resources and everything available to make things better? For one, that's one thing that we're always looking at. Number two, what are the students' feedback? What are the graduates' feedback? What are the employers' feedback? So, we are open. We love to ask, the companies and the employers that work with us, how is your experience? What would you see different? What do you like? What don't you like? We're very open and candid about feedback. I think that's important. And having strong partners allows for that. It's not just, if it's a donor, it's not just, here's a check.
Right.
I have had many experiences where I say, no, we don't want just that type of relationship. We want you to be partners in every sense of the word, and we do have that, and that allows the organization. Now, partners, it can be, the employer partner, it can be our social service partner, it can be our government partners, it can be our community partners in terms of the residents in the area, the people that we serve. But I think that our strong partnerships allow us an open dialogue and really get down to the root of what works for our participants, what works for our students, and also what works for the employers that ultimately employ our participants.
Okay, and you mentioned another word, residents. Now, let's say I'm a resident, and I'm curious about you. Take me through the process. I want to build my skills. I don't know much English. What's the process I go through?
Well, you can call or you can walk in, and depending on the types of services that you're looking for or that you need, someone will have a session with you and help you navigate through the variety of services that NLEI has to offer. Or if we don't have maybe what's right for you at that time, then we would be able to help you select or refer to the appropriate service. We don't have everything for everyone, and I make that very clear. We're if NLEI is unable to provide you, maybe, maybe it takes a little more literacy. Before we have English language programs, we have ESL programs, again, very focused on the outcome of a job, and we have them at different levels. But what we don't have is like, if someone is truly illiterate, for example.
In their own native language.
Right. So, but we're able to have in an honest session, and be able, to help you identify, okay, well, what is your goal, and maybe these are the kinds of things that we need to look at in order to accomplish your goal. And I think that's another, I believe, strong characteristic of the organization is you can't say, oh, yeah, we've got an English class, just, come into our services. Well, if you're not, at a certain level, why would we set you up that way? You want to set you up for success, and we want to be very honest, about maybe some of the things that need to be worked on, whether it's, attaining the GED, or maybe even going back to high school. That's another thing that we see a lot is, parents pulling kids out of high school and saying, well, can they just come here, and can they just get some job skills so they can get a job? And I feel for them, I feel for the parents, and so then that takes, some honest conversations, with the family, and kind of explaining that, there's, we can't just do that. And I sense the frustration, but we can provide, recommendations and referrals and things of that nature. But that happens too, we get getting back to that importance of education impacts, economic future.
Right.
I see that too in terms of many parents just wanting to pull their kids from certain environments and thinking, can they just go through this program really quickly and get a job, And so, but I can understand why sometimes we might, get into that cycle.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. This conversation could obviously go on for a very long time, and actually we're out of time today. But I hope to have you back soon, and thanks for sharing all of this information.
Thank you for all of your questions.
Perspectivas Latinas is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Perspectivas Latinas for local issues and concerns every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.